So it appears that Daniil Medvedev has indeed figured it out on the dirt. Tennis Twitter had long coined the term Clayvedev as a mark of all the adventures Daniil has gone through on the red dirt. The jokes have pretty much told themselves over the years, It's come from Medvedev's own self-deprecating attitude towards himself on the clay. You just go down the line and you have, Mamma Mia Santa Italia, you have, bad surface, every bounce is a bad bounce, etc., etc. Daniil Medvedev's struggles and hatred for the red clay has been long documented. But it turns out that we just needed some time for Tennis Twitter to manifest Clayvedev into the real world. Even from the get-go, from Monte Carlo this year, you could see that this was a different Daniil Medvedev on clay than the one we saw last time he was in Rome when he was blasted off the court by Aslan Karatsev in 2021 and gave us so much great meme content. The guy has now made quarters in Monte Carlo, round of 16 in Madrid, and the most significant, but perhaps the hardest to imagine, champion at Rome. And doing so pretty straightforward this week in the Italian capital. Just the one set dropped the entire tournament, and really some quality wins, The one match he dropped a set in against Zapata Miralles, who has been sneaky good on clay this season, was able to regroup really nicely in that one, play some great ball. And then in contrast to their meeting at Monte Carlo, where I thought Zverev was the better player throughout most of it, and Medvedev was just able to steal it away from him, in their Rome rematch, it was Medvedev large and in charge throughout. It would have been even more convincing had he not squandered his serve in the second set while he was up a break from 40-love. I believe it was at 4-3. And, it didn't really set him back that far, but I think still a really important win there. Zverev is a guy who I would consider a superior clay court player at his best, obviously struggling for confidence right now, but I think it did Medvedev's confidence a world of good. Really stamped emphatically that, his escape in Monte Carlo wasn't fluky. And then, of course, he just got better and better, Finished this tournament with 2 wins over guys who I would consider Tier 2 contenders for the French Open after Djokovic and Alcaraz. And of that tier, you really can't do much better this season with Holger Rune and Stefanos Tsitsipas, with the latter, of course, having a long documented, heated rivalry with Medvedev, and Steph really over the last year seemed to have been figuring out a better formula to how he approaches playing Medvedev, had won 4 of the last 6, and Medvedev being able to stem the tide at this particular tournament in such an important match, such a high leverage match, tremendous effort out of him against a guy who's been one of the most consistent clay court performers over the last couple of years. And then, albeit this match did have its ebbs and flows in the final against Holger, but nonetheless, he really just took care of business in the final. I didn't favor Medvedev against Zverev in this tournament. I didn't favor him against Steph. By the final, though, I was leaning Medvedev just sheerly because I thought the wear and tear was going to add up for Holger. Was coming off a near 3-hour semi against Ruud, and before that, played a couple of tough 3-setters against Novak and Popyrin, I believe. And Rune's fitness still can be a little bit suspect, so I thought Medvedev would get to his legs, and lo and behold, he did exactly that. It really seemed like about 3/4 through the first set, the rest of the match, it seemed like Medvedev had Holger just checked out of grinding with him. Lots of risky Hail Mary serve volley plays from Holger, as well as pulling the trigger super early in rallies. And to his credit, Daniil did exactly what he needed to do to get to Holger's legs. And, I mentioned earlier about Tier 1, Tier 2 contenders heading into Roland Garros this year. And with this title, I think I'm pretty comfortable saying I would put Daniil Medvedev in that Tier 2 of contender. Obviously, this year, that tournament's boogeyman and most decorated champion will not be playing, so it's one of the more wide-open Roland Garros as we've seen in recent memory. And with this form of Daniil Medvedev, dare I say semis is not out of the question? Obviously, we gotta wait for a draw and all, but Daniil Medvedev certainly has entered that conversation, and Ever since he made the quarters of Roland Garros and really hung with Tsitsipas, a really good Tsitsipas at that, in the French in 2021, I really was swayed to a lot of people's opinions of Medvedev on clay, where I think the struggles were a bit overblown, and honestly, a lot of that is marked up to the fact that Daniil Medvedev himself did not believe in his own abilities on the surface enough, and until this season never really gave himself the best chance to succeed on that surface. I have been saying ever since that French Open run in 2021 that I think that Medvedev has the tools to translate to being a threat on all the surfaces. And even before this year, you could see the potential there on clay for him. All the way back to 2019 when he made the semis of Monte Carlo, defeating Novak Djokovic there, and I believe making the final in Barcelona that same year. Of course, those good results were few and far between, but you've also got to look at, in addition to Medvedev's attitude being really disinterested in trying to even invest the mental energy into giving clay a chance. After that 2019, save 2021, he really hasn't played that much on the clay either. 2020 was a super truncated clay court swing, and he did terribly nonetheless, but there was that. Last year, he was out from Miami all the way until the week before the French Open, so really no chance to get any rhythm going there. But given some of those results before this year, and being a guy that moves as well as he does and is as quick as he does around the court, the skeleton was there for him to be better than what he had shown on clay. Now, I would say that there were some aspects that I think put a cap on how good he could be. There was a ceiling there, and this clay court season, honestly, I think he's exceeded that ceiling that I had for him at least. Of course, not just on clay, even the slower hard courts. A slower court has magnified sometimes a power deficiency for Medvedev. And regardless of how much he kept it together upstairs, that was going to be an issue against the cream of the crop on this surface. But all of a sudden this year, that isn't nearly as much of an issue. I would be lying if I said I could have foreseen just how impactful this change in strings has been for Medvedev. I think off the forehand, obviously, it was pretty apparent throughout his winning streak from indoor swing through Miami. Following the Australian Open, he was getting a lot more pop from the back of the court. Gave him quite a bit of freedom to be more proactive, and it translated pretty seamlessly to the clay. In addition to him not whining all the time, those positive attributes he possesses that translate to the surface in his court coverage, his rally tolerance, consistency on return, all of those were amplified. Well, I guess I shouldn't say all of those, his movement could be a bit clumsy at times in the past on clay. This year, I think he really became a lot more comfortable with sliding on the surface, much to his benefit. And when you add on a much more potent-looking forehand, there were really not any moments I can think of this year where Medvedev, unlike his past self on clay, looked underpowered. And I think as a result, you saw a lot of the patterns that you see from Medvedev opponents on hard courts taking place during the course of this clay court season. I think in this tournament itself, all of Zverev, Tsitsipas, and Rune looked like Medvedev had them pressing. And for all of them, the errors came in bunches during stretches of their matches against him. And it's just a crazy 180, seeing these quality clay court guys reeling at times against Daniil Medvedev. Sure, a lot of his clay court struggles were a lot of self-sabotage, but it's just insane to see him looking like this. I think he's surprised even himself with how quickly he's become so much more comfortable on clay. Clay competence was something that I think, a lot of us thought he had in him, but to turn it around this quickly and really still keep his momentum from, how red hot he was after the Australian Open on hard courts, he really hasn't cooled off at all. In fact, he leaves Rome now, number 1 in the race still, and number 2 in the rankings, will be seeded too at Roland Garros. It's just a crazy turnaround with how he has reversed his fortunes, both on clay and this year in general. Hit rock bottom, dropping to 12 in the world after the Australian Open exit in the third round. And since then, he has more than made up all that ground. With his 5th title of the season at Rome, I believe this is the most trophies he's secured in a season in his career to this point, and we're only in May right now. Crazy stuff, and he's quietly carving out quite the career for himself, up to 20 career titles and having conquered 6 of the 9 Masters titles as well as the World Tour Finals. With improved versatility now, he's really separating himself from a career standpoint among his generation. And again, with such a wide open Roland Garros this year, it's really going to be interesting now to see just how far this new and improved Clayvedev can go at the big one in Paris. But that will do it for this video. There will be more to come from me within this week with, a lot of really interesting storylines as we head into the year's second major. Of course, I have a lot planned with the Rafa news that dropped a couple days ago. And of course the aforementioned RG build-up. But beyond that, if you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around, and if you enjoyed the video, it would be much appreciated if you could drop a like. It only takes a second and makes a big difference in how the video performs in YouTube's algorithm, and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you all again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.